Welcome to Da Vinci's Discourse, where the minds of today's most innovative entrepreneurs are unveiled and explored. And my name is Kyle Campbell, your guide on this journey into the depths of the entrepreneurial psyche. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the minds of the greats. This is Da Vinci's Discourse.
No.
So, dude, let's get into it, brother. So, why don't you
Okay,
tell
go for
me
it.
a little bit about yourself, man? What do you do, and what do you love about what you do?
Okay, so I'm Mark Bowden. I'm an expert in human behavior and body language, and I help people all over the world to stand out, win trust, and gain credibility every time they communicate. So that's what I do. Why do I love that? Well, I think it's really good to help people, and people have trouble with communication,
Yeah.
and it's possible to get help, and it's possible to get really good help to make life a lot easier. And so when I see people who've got a bit of a problem with it, I'm just very happy to fix that problem really quickly and economically. So I hope that answers your question.
Wow, man. Okay, interesting. You're a fascinating guy. So, tell me, let's set up a hypothetical scenario. Let's say that I'm a horrible communicator. So, one of your clients
Mhm.
that's come to you and is saying, okay, I'm having problems with my relationships, with my confidence, all kinds of different things that could be as a result of being a poor communicator. Where would
Mhm.
we start, you and I? So, where do I start in terms of improving my communication ability?
Yeah, well, I would first of all ask you, like that, what you gave me there was quite a what I call a proliferation of issues.
Yeah.
So I'd say to you, out of all those things that you mentioned, which one, if you could fix that today, which one would have the biggest impact on your life?
Interesting. Okay, so let's say we'll go with the lack of clarity in thinking and maybe some initial stuttering moving forward. I feel like that's a common problem. While we're trying
Okay.
to get our thoughts straight, there's an and ah process that we go through, and then we get it. We see the goal of what we want to reach, and then we get it. We move
Uh,
towards it. So let's say that that's the problem that I'm struggling with. How would we go about fixing that?
yeah, well, it sounds like you have the answer there because it sounds like that when you know where you're going,
Yeah.
that maybe you're hitting the target uh, without those ums and ahs and stutters. So I
Yeah.
wonder when you and you are and you stutter, do you really know where you're going in the
No.
same way? Okay, so it's different.
Totally
Yeah.
different. I'm waiting for the answer to come so that I can move towards it. So that there's a waiting period that takes place. And I
Oh,
don't know what the problem with it is, but I noticed that there's a waiting. I'm waiting for the goal, and I don't know what to do in the meantime as I'm waiting for it to pop up.
oh.
So
Why
there's
don't you
a
just why
period
not
of
just what
intermission.
why not just wait?
I suppose so, but I guess it's so deeply embedded that I have to have some sort of a response when somebody has a pause or when it's my turn to speak in the communication dynamic, you know? So it's
Right.
a conditioned response that's been ingrained over the last 28 years.
Right, right. I get you. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here to jump to the answer less quickly and wait just that in silence, just that little bit longer. I'm not saying wait forever. I'm just wondering if you could just test a little bit,
Mm, mm.
waiting for something to come so you don't feel compelled to answer immediately. Does that seem possible that you could do that a little bit more?
Well, let me sit and think about it for a sec. There's a point there. It's interesting. It's just that there is a conditioned response that's so deeply embedded. I'm wondering if there's a way to unroot it, to maybe go back to the beginning of it and find where it started and be able to reframe the meaning behind that
Possibly,
experience. Hmm.
possibly. Like, in what situations or with who do you find that you're jumping to wanting to answer immediately more? I mean, does it happen with some people or some situations more than others?
I would say the situation that it happens in is over Zoom calls. In person, I don't have the same issue, not necessarily, not to the point of where it is over Zoom, I guess. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so there's some sort of a dynamic with Zoom. I can't see the full body language. There's some sort of a disconnect because we're not in person together. The eye contact is different. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of different factors that could go into it. So I suppose it
So
would be
would it
Zoom.
be fair to say that the Zoom calls concern you a little bit more than the non-Zoom calls? Like there's a little more sense of like, I don't quite know what's going on here with that other person.
I suppose because I can't see the full body language, nor can I feel the energy as effectively as I can if I were in person with somebody.
Right.
So there is that disconnect. But I wouldn't say that I care more about the Zoom conversation as opposed to a real life conversation.
Right, but there's some concern that you're not getting as much information about that person. And
Yeah.
it sounds like what you're doing with that situation is to try and answer stuff quicker, to fill the space, to fill the gap. You've got this gap of information, like what are they really thinking? What are they feeling? It's like you can't see it. It's not all the information isn't there. And so it sounds to me like you're jumping in to fill that gap. Does that make some kind of sense to you?
Yes, it does. And so
Okay.
what would you say would be the fix for this, the cure, the goal of moving towards? How would we get there with one of your techniques?
So I got some ideas about that, but before I tell you my ideas, what's your best guess at the fix?
I like the pausing, but when it comes to the Zoom calls, there's something psychological that's going on where I have to get over the fact that there's no real eye connection. And the full body language and the energy is the feeling is different, at least initially. Then we get into flow, and then there's a completely different feeling that takes over. You don't realize that we're
Oh,
on Zoom anymore, but the initial maybe 10, 20 minutes, I have a hard time getting into that flow and getting that connection the same way that I would if we were in person together. So, in terms of a solution, I suppose there could be a mental exercise where I imagine that we're in person together, but I'm not sure how effective it would be because I'm still missing the bigger picture of your full
yeah.
body language. Um,
I mean, I think you're right. Like to try and imagine that this is actually real.
right,
I mean, not
exactly.
real, but I mean face to face. It's a bit of an imaginative leap. And at the
Yeah,
same time as your brain trying to imagine that, it's still going, but we're lacking so much information. We're lacking so much information. So there's that. So yeah, I think your idea of it's no good imagining yourself out of this situation. You did say something which I think was really key, which it passes. Like it
right.
goes away after a while. Here's one solution. Um, if you get a post-it note, what I might do if I had your issue, I will put it will pass. And I'm going to put that on the post-it note like that. Yeah. And I'm going to stick it up on there
Yeah.
just to remind me, like whatever's happening right now, it will go and it'll disappear in time.
I
Yeah.
think
Knowing
what
that
the
when I
issue is,
worry,
it's unconscious. I mean, there's some kind of unconscious blockage that's taking place. There's too much information being taken in for the first maybe second before I go
right.
into it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of things taking place.
I know.
Fair
I know.
enough. Fair
I
enough.
know. I
Uh-huh.
know. I know. I
Because I
know.
have questions that pop up and I store them in a bank as I'm listening to somebody, right? So I've got
I
question,
know.
question, question, and I'm able to keep track of them and then choose the one that I think will be the most effective in terms of taking the conversation where I want it to go. So
Yeah.
I've got that. I'm choosing between questions to ask as well as handling the answer that I get from the person. There's a lot that goes into it when you really break it down consciously. Now, most of this takes place unconsciously, except for the
Yeah.
question storage in the database. But I think that is so ingrained, so rooted, and it will pass. I see this.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that it is so there's some kind of an experience in my childhood, obviously, that created this need to fill the silence.
Of course.
And that's an
Yeah.
interesting revelation, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. 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 And the thing is that all might be true, but it sounds that it's also true from what you've told me that it disappears after a while. And the only issue is at the start. Yeah. And your self-consciousness of like, oh, it's happening again. It's happening again. I stuttered. I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know where I'm
Where
going.
I'm going, yes.
It's happening again. And it will always happen, but it will pass. Yeah. And the more you realize it's always going to start like that, but it won't finish like that. The more you understand that, the
Mm,
quicker it will pass.
mm,
The more you go. So first of all, it sounds to me like what you're telling me is at the start of every Zoom conversation, You're going to stutter. You're going to not quite know where you're going. It's going to be uneasy.
It's not necessarily we're maybe mislabeling it, because it's not an uneasy feeling. It's not a stuttering, really. Really, what it is waiting for the goal of what I want to reply with to pop up. So there's an
right,
unconscious lag, I guess you could say, where I feel the need to fill the silence as opposed to waiting, knowing that it will come and going towards it when it does come. So there's, I mean, even realizing that there's something to be said about that. So I want to walk
right.
through your process that you just took me through, because
Yeah,
it's fascinating. I feel like anybody who's watching who has any sort of communication issue would be able to maybe self medicate in a way with your process, if we can go through where your mind went in terms of walking me through that, so that anybody could take what you have as in terms of the process laid out and be able to apply it to themselves with whatever their speech issue or communication issue might be. Is that cool?
sure. Yeah. Look, the first thing was to pick a problem because you
Right.
had your first, you had And it's like, man, we got half an hour together or whatever it is, and it's like I can't, like you'll need to pick a problem. I won't be able to pick it for you, so you're going to need to pick the problem. So that's what we call prioritization, and I'll do that with any client, because any client, when you sit in front of them and you go, hey, so what brings us in this room together? Why are we here? What means that you're going to pay whatever money you're going to pay for me to sit down with you, or your organization has said, okay, you're going to sit down with Mark and you're going to and he's going to help. I still need to go, why are you here? And of course they will go, well, there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this and that and whatever, and and they'll talk about things about themselves, and they'll talk about things about other people and things about the organization and the world outside.
Yes,
And I'm like,
escape at all
okay.
costs. Get me out of here. There's a lion in the room.
And
I need to get
sometimes
out.
sometimes I'll cut them off and go, look, yeah, okay, no, I get that. I get all of that. I get all of that. But what's the big problem for you today?
Hmm.
And so I've got to get them to give me top of the hierarchy for them today. Doesn't mean it might not be a different problem tomorrow. That's okay. But which is the one today that they want to work on and they want to fix? So that was the first move.
Right.
And then probably the second move is like, okay, well then tell me more about that. So I need them to now describe that problem.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, then within that description of the problem, sometimes there's some stuff because I don't have the problem. Even if I did have something similar, it isn't that because I'm not them.
Right. Yeah.
So here's the thing that I'm not doing. I'm not going, oh yeah, okay, no, I've had that problem before. Here's how you fix it.
Right.
And I'm not going, I had a client just like you last week who had exactly the same thing. Here's what I did with them. It will work for you. Now, that's not that might not be true, because the fix for them may well be the same fix for you. Okay.
Right. But the
But
cause
you're not
is
going to take,
completely
yeah,
different.
the
Yeah.
causes and the feeling and your internalization of it.
Right. Oh yeah.
And
Which is
and I
fascinating.
need you to take the medicine as well. And if you think it's medicine that was for somebody else and it doesn't have your name on the prescription,
Yeah, it's true. Even the
then
placebo alone, you're thinking, oh, there's something wrong with it. Even if the
absolutely. Well,
solution
it's the
would be the
same. It's the
same,
same
right? Yeah.
placebo effect that he gave to that person down the road the other day. How valuable is that? Yeah. So the placebo effect is partly around the inferred value of the medicine that actually doesn't make any chemical change, but makes a
Yeah.
psychological change.
Right. Which
Yeah.
then affects the chemicals on the physiological level. So, I mean, there's
Right.
incredible power with the meaning that we give to things.
Absolutely. We know placebo effect
Yeah.
works better than some drugs. So, so, you know, so, so,
Which is
and
insane when you think
in
about that,
this,
which is
and
true.
in this, it's true. And in
Yeah.
this situation here, I can't touch you. I can't give you I can't give you a chemical of any sort. So you're going to have to make your own and move
Yeah.
your own body in some way. I
Yeah.
can't manipulate you in any way. Um, so look, you describe the problem, you describe the issue, Now there are many routes that we can go after as you're describing it, but what I do is I really try to listen to your description of it and try and look for what are some of the anomalies in
Mm,
it.
mm,
So for example, I think in your initial description, you were kind of saying, yeah, in your initial description of it, you were kind of saying you inferred that sometimes it's okay and sometimes it isn't. So it's
yeah.
like, well, hang on. So this is not a problem Kyle has all the time. So how's that? Because for example, if I've broken my leg, I've broken my leg all the time until it's healed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So you're
fair.
saying me, your problem, you have it sometimes, and then sometimes you don't have it.
So the question
So I'm
becomes,
like,
how do I know when to have the problem? That's an interesting
right,
question to ask because
right.
it's taking the unconscious process and bringing it to the top where I'm able to see it and examine it. And then that changes the whole meaning and a process that's taking place without me realizing it moving forward. So
Well, that's
that's an
brilliant because
interesting
you
question.
asked a different question to me, and I think it's a really good question, which is how do you know when to have the problem?
Right. It
That's
just
an
it
interesting
presumes that there's
idea.
some value to it
It
too.
presumes that there is. And
Mm.
I'm not against that. I'm not against part of your brain going, you know what, it'd be really valuable not to say anything right now, but keep on talking, but not to really say anything because I don't
Yeah.
really know what to say. I don't, but I fear the punishment of saying nothing. So I'm going to say
Mm.
something, but
Mm.
it won't, but I'll know it won't really be hitting a point because I don't know what the point is, but I'll suffer because internally I'll be going, what are you talking about? This is nonsense. But I'd rather have that suffering than the suffering of feeling like I'm not doing anything. So it's like I will pay this
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So once I've worked that out in my head, I'm like, okay, well, why is that a good deal for you? And is that the deal
Mm.
you want to
Mm.
keep? Like,
Love
like it
that.
sounds like you're paying one thing for another thing. It
Yeah.
sounds like it's a good deal because you keep on going with it
Yeah, fair enough.
until you don't, until it's not like I don't need this deal anymore. I've now got my idea of where
Yeah.
to go. So we can look, and all we're doing is just dismantling in some way and talking about, what's going on and seeing if there's opportunities for things being different. That's all. And then we go like, would you like to take that different opportunity? Like I said, hey, there's an opportunity here just to kind of wait longer,
Yeah. And
you know?
experience some connection in that silence, even as they was computing what they had just said. Yeah, there's an
Ah, right,
opportunity
right,
there.
right. So I like what you said there. So you were saying, look, what I've experienced before is like I've experienced some disconnection in that silence. Like
Yeah.
I'm disconnected from. I'm going to make stuff up here, but I'm disconnected from my feelings of being confident
Right.
speaking.
Yeah.
Okay, but now what you're saying is there's an opportunity for being connected to the silence.
Hmm.
That's really interesting. How would that feel against that? Would you be willing to suffer? I mean, it sounds like you're going to have this disconnect anyway. So I'm wondering whether you'd be prepared just to like go full on for the connection to the silence. What do you
Hmm.
think?
It's an interesting thought. I'm wondering if the solution could be to find a way to speed up the mental processes so that there is no gap there. Because there is, and it's kind of societal, there is an expectation to fill the silence. It's something that we've been raised since kids. Otherwise, you're an awkward kid and nobody wants to be that. So you start to evolve your communication habits and then they get cemented in and it's very difficult to unroot them, right? So we need to take a jackhammer and find the root of the cause, the root cause, Sigmund Freud would say, right? Find the root cause and be able to change the meaning of it. So that way, when it moves forward unconsciously, there is a different response to the silence.
Yeah, look, there is that way forward of going. Okay, there is that way forward, but here's what it's going to cost. Okay, to go through that, as you said, like that Sigmund Freud route,
Yeah.
that's going to cost you probably minimum $250 an hour every day, every week for probably let's say 2 to 3 years. Okay.
At least if it's not your entire
Okay.
life. Yeah,
Okay. And
that's
look, there's a whole
it.
industry out there. There's nothing wrong with that industry, but it's very reliant for people to make their living on going, it's X amount an hour every week for the next X amount of years. They're not going to tell you that up front, but honestly, that's how, on the whole, they're going to feed their kids and buy the things that they need and live the life that they need to lead. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is not a bad methodology. I'm saying, so for example, you said, I wonder whether there's some way of speeding up the brain to be able to deal with that. I don't know. I don't know whether we can make your brain work any faster, but we could certainly give it some stock things to say to fill the gap.
Interesting.
Okay. So let's come up with now. A lot of people will go, well, that isn't fixing the problem. It's like, okay, I understand that's not fixing the root problem. The cost of fixing the root problem is $250 minimum for an hour every week for the next 3 years. Okay. It might be shorter, it might be longer. And some people will be able to go, I reckon I can do it in 8 weeks, or okay, fine. But let's say, for the sake of argument, for the sake of other opportunities, the other fix is, like, what is some of the stuff that you could say in that gap of silence that would fill that gap, and you'd feel good about how you filled that gap, while you think you're not going to have to think about what you're about to say, because we're going to write it down on a post-it note and stick it on the screen. Okay.
Will come.
So you're
Yeah.
never going to have to think. It's not going to use up any neural resource for you. Yeah. And while you're saying that, you'll use that resource to think, where am I going here? What do I really want to talk about? Okay. Give me one of the things, one possible thing that you could say.
Interesting, fascinating. I love that. These are the stock things that I will slip in there while I'm calculating or waiting for the vision to pop up.
Right.
Because I think very visually. So what I'm doing right now is I'm translating the visual representation of the words that I'm saying in my mind and converting them to words, to language, so that you can understand the pictures that I'm seeing internally.
Yeah, I do the same. Yeah, see pictures in my head, and then they all connect together, and I come up with an idea. I've just written this down quickly, okay? And it says, interesting. I love that. I'm getting an idea about this pop up in my head right now. Okay, so Kyle, ask me a question.
How do you know when to have the idea that comes to your mind?
Interesting. I love that question. I'm getting an idea just popping up in my head right now about that. And it's really about taking a breath, waiting, and for me, seeing the ideas kind of come together in a train of thought. But sometimes it doesn't come quickly, and I have to just wait a little bit.
You don't know where it's going to take you, which is exciting. There's a mystery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. It is exciting. It's not for everybody.
True.
Not everybody's mind works like that, but certainly mine, I sometimes have to look in a direction.
Yeah, me too. Big time. Because you're kind of thinking externally. It's strange, man. Because literally you're not seeing the thoughts externally, but you move your eyes in a way that it looks like you are looking at something externally. And we kind of do think outside in that way, which is fascinating, and it's deep, and there's a spiritual component to that too. There's really, you're creating something, and we don't really know where our thoughts come from. This is such a fascinating conversation. We have no idea where they come from, or where the idea is coming from, or why it's coming, or how it's coming. I mean, there's it's a total mystery, but here we are, we're just kind of bumbling our way through it. It's taking them as they come and then putting them out verbally, which is such a fascinating thing to break down.
And I think as you tell me about that,
hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast, and I want to let you know that I've got a free book that you can get if you want to tap into more of these resources, and you can get that for free at kylesbook.com. Back to the podcast.
It feels at the same time quite a risky thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to take the risk, and you seem
Yeah.
happy to take the risk, and
Yeah.
we're, you know, here we are
It's
having a chat
exciting. Yeah.
together,
Right.
and we're taking this risk together. But that risk isn't for everybody. You know, talking off the top of your head, having a conversation, risking the thoughts out loud,
Yeah.
isn't for everybody. I mean, in Jung's first ideas around, from my point of view, my understanding of it, Jung, the site, as you well know, Carl, but for your listeners out there, viewers out there, um, uh, psychologist, psychoanalyst, student of Freud, they argued
Yeah.
eventually.
They're coming apart. Yeah.
so, so not a Freudian, a Jungian,
Yes.
in the
Yes.
end. To my understanding, he coined the idea of introvert and extrovert,
Yeah.
and his idea about it, which has changed over time, not his idea, but other people's idea about introvert and
Exactly.
extrovert,
Yeah. Yeah.
was the introvert needs to think internally about something before they'll maybe take the risk and use
Right.
the energy to go, here's what I want to communicate about it. Whereas the extrovert will start communicating, and as they're communicating, they'll be thinking at the same time.
Yeah.
And there were some other factors to that, but I'm reducing it enough for our conversation here, um, to say and also to say that it's often fair to say that we're all ambiverts.
Yeah.
We're
Fair enough.
introvert and
Yeah.
extrovert.
Depending
It
on the
depends on
context.
this.
And
Yeah, it
yeah.
depends on the context. You're absolutely right. Depends on the
Yeah.
context. And my guess is, Kyle, is it's not a guess. You are an ambivert because you're a human being, and we are ambiverts, but we have biases as to which way we like to go. But in this situation, my guess is you're having to pick now and again whether to be an extrovert or an introvert.
Unconsciously, it's probably happening all the time. Yeah.
All the time. It's like you are,
Mm.
you've invited me for this podcast, and it's like, damn, you better come up with some questions. You
On the
better
spot.
come
Yes.
you better come up
Zero,
with some
zero
content on the spot.
preparation with questions. I don't do any preparation with
Right.
questions because I want to explore together, have that complete risk and see where it goes, which is
Okay.
exciting. Yes.
Interesting. So
But
but yeah. So you don't know what's going to happen next. Okay.
no
You don't know
idea.
what's going to happen
Yeah.
next, which
No.
means you're going to have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really take it in and come up with ideas and then deliver those ideas. And at the same time, you're making a podcast and you better fill the space. There must be no dead air on
Exactly.
this. So
Yeah.
I think the issue is you're probably having to jump between extrovert and introvert at
Hmm.
such a rapid rate that it's not comfortable. Now, should it ever be comfortable? Probably not. I mean, I don't think that's a very comfortable position to be in. It's like you've chosen a role which most people don't choose. You may think there are a lot of podcasts out there. Most human beings on the planet, there's around about just under 8 billion people on the planet. And most of them don't have podcasts. So you're in a tiny, tiny group of people who decide, to, without a grand support mechanism around them, like a network,
Yeah.
who go, hey, Carl, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, true.
After this
Right.
show, you don't walk down your network corridor and every intern go, hey, Carl, good job.
No, but internally with the complexes from a Jungian point of view, perhaps we do, and perhaps we
Perhaps
should
you
pay more
do.
attention to those because this is something that's interesting. What I struggle with and what I feel like a lot of people struggle with is they'll have this external validation seeking, where
Mhm.
as they were a kid, they were taught that they have to seek from mommy and daddy, this is okay, this isn't okay. And they weren't
Mhm.
taught to judge or validate their own feelings and emotions based on what they did internally. So we're taught to externalize the validation process. But what you're
Right.
talking about is with that intern saying, "Oh, good job, good job." You're having those complexes internally say that to you afterwards, and you're judging your own performance, I suppose.
Well,
And
that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I
right,
mean,
fascinating.
and it's nice that you've got a very positive intern.
Yes, well, they're
Online,
not always, not
but
always
not always.
positive, man.
Yeah, some of those
Yes.
interns, although you've employed them, are like, you suck. Like,
Yeah, well,
this
that's
is
the back.
terrible.
See,
That
I've
was
mapped it
terrible.
all out, right? The back left corner is the fucking the assholes, the naysayers, right? And you got
Right.
And there's
Right.
the totality of the psyche, which you can map it out and see where the thoughts come from. Creativity, top right. If I'm
Right.
creating something, I'm looking to the top right. And so I'm literally looking internally and externally to where the
Yeah.
creations come from. And so those
Yeah.
are the complexes that create, complexes that tear down.
Judge.
Right, exactly. And then so
Yeah.
the dichotomy, it's a balance, the black and white between the two. And it's interesting because they're actually in opposite of one another in the location in my psyche.
Hmm.
Yes, it's
So my guess is if we look at that as like a spatial map,
yeah.
as you are, and you were kind of doing this kind of gesture here, it
Yeah,
feels
yeah.
to me like it can get out of balance, and that can be unnerving. It's like, whoa, what's happening here? I've got this
Yeah.
bit of creativity happening over here, and I'm coming up with a really good question. At the same time, you've got this negative intern
Right.
going, man, you're taking too long. You're taking too, you like
Yeah,
talk, talk,
yeah.
talk. You're taking too
Unconsciously, that's
long.
happening. Exactly. Yeah.
Right, right. And it's unbalancing. And I think the thing
Yeah.
is, I think often what people hope for is, you know what, it's going to get better and I will defeat this battle that's
Mm,
going on
mm.
rather than and I'm not saying that's not possible. I think that battle gets defeated often best at $250 plus an hour,
Yes, well, yeah, fair enough.
52 weeks a year for about
Yeah.
3 years. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So, but meanwhile, one of the things you can do is just know that the battle will be there and manage the battle, which means before you even start the podcast or whatever it is that's causing, for anybody listening and watching, causing the thing, just go, you know what, this is going to happen again. It's going to happen again. There's going to be an imbalance. I'm going to start my podcast and I will feel that tension and that pull between being creative and also judging myself, and it's not going to go away. How would I manage it better? How would I manage it better, knowing that it cannot? It's not going anywhere. Unless I stop the pod. I mean, you could stop the podcast.
Right,
I
but
mean,
then it would
that's
still happen whenever I do a Zoom call with a client. So it's not the podcast, it's, I got to do calls to make some money in this world, right? So,
right,
and
right.
hmm. What I think about when it comes to is, I'm creating, I'm looking top right. What I think about is I want a union between the two. I'm looking for some sort of a not a dictatorship, because a lot of people think that they can dictate these complexes. I don't look at it like that. I'm looking for a democracy where we're having a voting system and we're having a debate, and the truth will prevail from this debate
Right.
that takes place. And you can
Nice.
have these conversations with yourself, with your complexes as you go along, and you can find these unions. But then again, it's $250 an hour for 3 years. So that's where you do that. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting. What came up in my mind as you were talking about that is basically there's some politics going on because you
yeah.
used political ideas like democracy and a union, a marriage. So you go,
Yes.
I'd like a marriage of
It is
this.
like a marriage. Yeah,
It's like a
bickering like
marriage.
married
Okay.
partners.
Well,
Yeah.
in marriage, I don't know whether you're married at all, Kyle. I'm married, and I remember there's a whole ceremony that goes on, and and families show up and you have a party and you sign legal documents. Most people forget that bit because when they, if they get divorced, they're like, what, hang on, you own half of everything. That I was like, yeah, you signed a piece of paper. We both signed a piece of paper that says everything that I have is now yours and everything that you have is mine. And that's now the deal. That was but I don't, people go, but that's not fair. It's like, well, you shouldn't have signed the document. If you didn't think it was fair, you shouldn't
Mm.
have signed the document in the first place. So look, here's what happens in a marriage is there's some really specific like ceremony and documents that get signed. Do you think you could come up with the ceremony and the documents to marry those two things
Interesting.
together?
Interesting. Um, yeah, that's what I was wondering as you were saying that, is what is going to be on the document between the two married partners here? Because I've had experiences where I am visualizing the two complexes, or visualizing a younger version of myself, or multiple, and then having. See, these are the complexes that come up and I visualize them. The complexes that are created based on emotional experiences in the past. And I've had
Hmm.
experiences where it is like a marriage where the two come together, hold hands, and form a union as a circle. like the
Ah,
Ouroboros, the snake eating its own
yeah, I
tail.
get you. Yeah,
Yes, exactly. So, I
yeah.
mean, what would be on that paper would be, it's hard for me to, because it's visual for me. So it may be pictures.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, fair enough. Give me the picture document that you would be prepared to for both parts to sign
It's a
and go,
circle.
okay, we'll buy that. We'll
This
buy
is the
into that.
ring. This
That's
is
the deal.
this is
That's
the
the
ring in
ring.
the marriage. It's a
Right.
circle,
Right.
and
Right.
sometimes there's fractures in the circle, and so the goal of the internal exercise is to reunite the circle so that there is a whole union together, and the
Right.
two come together as one.
Right. What's the deal you would make? One side would make with the other. Both
Difficult.
sides can agree with. What's the deal?
It's hard because there's positives and negatives to everything. So it takes a lot of negotiating to have the right negatives and positives between the two that they agree with because they're total opposites. So, but
Yeah.
then you lean into the opposite, it also becomes the same argument. If you lean way into it, the coin flips and you go around. Like, for
Yeah. I
example,
mean, it's
I'm feeling
tricky, isn't it?
anxiety,
Because
then
in a
I lean into the
marriage,
anxiety and
in
then
a
try to push
marriage,
it
the
away.
deal is actually very, very simple, which is
Right.
it's super simple, which is for the whole of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna love you
Mm.
regardless.
Mm.
Yeah. And everything that's mine is gonna be yours. And it doesn't matter whether you're really ill or you're super fit. Like I'm there. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's not a deal that everybody can keep. Okay. It's just not a deal that everybody can keep. But that's, from what I've looked at, the majority of marriage ceremonies that I've ever come across, that's kind of the deal that's being made. Now, when you were talking about that marriage between the two, and you were
Yeah.
asking for a marriage, and you're going, "Oh, I want a ring as well," I want
Yeah.
all that stuff. And it felt to me like, but but I really want to negotiate this deal. I want to. It's like, no, simple deal. A marriage is a very simple deal. Now the key is keeping that deal. Simple deal, but the key is managing that deal and keeping that deal. It's simple. You got to do it every day.
Mm. That's the thing, is it changes day to day. There is this simplistic deal that can take place. We have to realize that we're stuck with one another. There's no,
Right.
there's no divorce.
If
We're
you make
stuck in
if
the
you
same
make that
space.
deal, yeah, if you make that deal, you're stuck. Yeah, if you make that deal, you're stuck. And so that's what I'm saying by managing this, because what
Mm.
the $250 an hour, 52 days a week for 3 years deal says is that I will I think in some people's minds what they're looking for is that what did you call it, complex, that complex will get eradicated or removed or dealt with. Yeah.
Integrated. Yeah.
Integrated is the way to say it. Yeah. And therefore I won't feel it anymore.
Mm.
And that would be
Yeah.
rather like a marriage that says, I will integrate
Mm.
you so much that you won't exist in my mind anymore.
Mm.
Okay. Okay, it's an interesting marriage, but that process isn't looking for that. It's looking to integrate it so it doesn't bother anymore.
Right.
Okay. What I'm saying is if we manage this today and get a marriage contract sorted out, it's going to bother you, but you're going to work on keeping the contract. Because the
Mm.
moment you have no contract, so it's like this thing bothers you, and you're like, man, like, what are you doing? Like, they're both arguing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like they're going to carry on arguing until you say, both of you, you're not going to argue anymore. Here's the deal we're making on this.
Mm.
Here's the deal we're going to make. And it's going to be a hard deal to keep, but we're going to work on keeping the deal on this. Yeah, instead of getting so annoyed that we're in conflict all the time. We're going to deal about our conflict.
Mm.
So it's not so we know it's there, so we can accept it. We can accept the conflict. Does that make some sense?
Yeah, to a very deep level. What I'm wondering is how you specifically were able to find a marriage between parts so that you don't have the internal conflicts. You don't have the problem at the beginning of a podcast or a conversation on Zoom where you're trying to fill space because of this unconscious battle that's taking place.
Ah,
How did you
yeah. Okay.
specifically find unification?
Yeah. So here's what I do personally is that is that, these complexes are, just as much a part of me as they are of you. Okay, I got those as well, all kind of going on around me. What I've worked out is that in some situations, some of those don't matter. They're not important because other things are more important. So what's most important right now, is you and the people who come and listen, everybody listening and watching this right now. Yeah. And because I've come into this podcast with all these complexes, and I've gone, before I've even started, I've gone, you know what? None of that matters. The only thing that's going to matter is Kyle and everybody who's watching because Kyle has showed up, and follow him and watch his part. There's something people like about the conversations that Kyle has. It's helpful for them. They've come along to be entertained and helped and engaged in some way, and that's the only thing that matters. And so the other stuff in my mind is just gone because I'm focused on what matters. Now they'll be back.
Okay. Yeah, they always come back, pesky little bastards, but that's the
They'll
part of
be
it.
back. Yeah, sure, they'll be back. That's okay, but not just right now.
So there's a
They're
real
not
going with the
helpful.
flow that you're experiencing. There's not
Oh,
a
I'm
battle.
deciding the flow. I'm deciding it consciously. I'm
Mm.
deciding it.
How do you do that?
Well,
How
let
do
me
you?
decide. Let me tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to decide not to go. I'm going to decide to let those complexes in, and for you um and your audience not to be the most important things.
Okay.
So, I mean, now I'm going to decide again. Now I'm going to decide again to make, you and your audience the most important things. And it's starting to come in right now, but it's a decision that I'm having to make. There's a transition from one to the other. I have to do it on purpose. It will not happen on its own.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you think visually. So what is the visual experience that's happening when you're making that transition between the two? What is that experience like
Oh,
subjectively?
I just allowed all of the external triggers for all of the other stuff that's going on in my life instead of you and this camera where I know that the audience and this microphone here where I know those are the sensor devices that the most important people, on this call are. They're being contacted via these and making those the focus. But the moment I don't make those the focus, like I've got there's just so you wouldn't believe it. There's so much. I'm using the external triggers of the world. Yeah. Oh, let me show you another
Goes
external.
back to introversion and extroversion. You're flipping between the two from
Yeah,
introvert.
it's an easy flip. One easy
Yeah.
flip for me is to take my uniform off.
Okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You're anchored towards it.
Yeah. So now I've taken my uniform off. You'll see a whole bunch of behaviors that you weren't seeing before because I use that uniform of, wearing whenever I'm working with an audience of any sort or helping anybody, a client, I wear a specific uniform in order to trigger me into a set of behaviors and patterns and thought processes which are more helpful to them.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've set
So
up
this is now trickier and a lot harder for me to do, and it's very simple for me just to trigger it back in again.
Martin Luther King used to do that with his glasses. He had fake glasses and he would
Did
put the
he?
glasses
Okay.
on. Yeah, his wife revealed this after he died. He put fake glasses on before he went to speak. And that was his channeling that Martin Luther King vibe that we all remember him by. He put the
Right.
glasses on, he stepped into this persona and was able to channel that and take on the people of the world. And so you're doing that
Amazing.
same thing when you put the jacket on. You're
A
stepping
costume.
into the new role that you need to
Yeah.
be in to be able to perform at the level of what you expect yourself to
Well,
perform
I'm using external triggers to help trigger me get cleanly into that role.
cleanly.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cleanly into that role. So the transition is quick and sharp. So that it's not like I'm half an hour into the podcast and then suddenly I'm like, oh, there's the moment where Mark, the person who can be helpful around communication. They
Right.
turned up half an hour in, just like
Mm.
Martin Luther King. Not that I'm saying, hey, I'm just like Martin Luther King,
By the way.
but to what you're saying about what his wife said there, he's got a really good trigger, which is I put on these glasses, and that helps me go, okay, I'm this aspect of me. And I think that's important for people to understand, because we're very easy to go, well, that doesn't sound very authentic. I mean, he's lying, isn't he? He didn't need glasses. He doesn't need anything for his eyesight. No, what he's doing is finding a clear trigger to bring out further a specific aspect of
Yeah.
him. It's all him,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Like, I don't talk like this to my kids, because if I kept on talking like this all the time, it'd just be plain annoying. Yeah. You're like,
Yeah,
Dad,
fair
can you
enough.
shut up? I'm trying to watch TV, or I need you to listen to me right now. Yeah. But that doesn't mean this is a lie or that's a lie. It's all me. But the
Yeah.
context deserves and requires, in my mind, a different aspect of me turned up further,
Yeah. Right.
you know,
It's
and
still
and
you,
not
man. The same way that you're different with your grandmother than you are with your kids or with your wife. I mean, it's still you, but there are three very different individuals that take place and come to light, come to the surface, or come on the stage of the ego.
right.
I visualize it all. So I look at it as a stage, and I've got the crowd around me of the complexes. And
Interesting.
yes, and so who's at the microphone is either me as the ego or a complex that's speaking for me. And it's up to
Hmm.
me to recognize when a complex is speaking and to be able to take the mic back if necessary. And so
So hang on, that's interesting. So is it not okay for a complex to speak?
it depends on the situation. If it's going to get me in
Ah,
trouble, if it's going to hurt somebody, then it's not okay. And you
okay,
have
I
to,
like that.
and so the democracy has decided that that's the case. And so we have a system unconsciously, none of this happens consciously, a system
Right.
to step the complex off the stage if something is going awry. And we have an
Ah,
adjustment system that takes place automatically.
interesting. So you aren't just an individual. You're an individual who's part of a social group.
You
And
could
if
say
you
that.
and
Yeah,
your individual is made up of different aspects. And if
right.
some of those aspects come out, it can, in the wrong place, it can hurt one of the other or many of the other parts of the social group. It might upset your grandmother, and
Right.
you and your and you, as a social human being, a social mammal, you're going, well, there's me, but also there's me that exists with the social group, and without the social group, I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to do well. It's going
Yeah,
to be painful. So I
right.
better make sure that things, serve everybody in some way. And sometimes those things will get out of whack as well.
No
Sometimes
kidding.
you'll go, I
And
don't care.
then
I
comes
don't
the
care about
$250 an hour, 52 weeks
right.
for 3 years, right? The question
Right.
becomes, man, is I look at this as a totem because you're taking something physical and you're having it trigger you into stepping
Yeah.
into a new role. And so the question becomes, how do you condition yourself so that a physical item, like a special pen or headphones, something can trigger you into stepping into that role? How do you set up that trigger? Because the way I look at
Mm.
it is you're conditioning yourself. So for example, every time you make a sale, you grab the same item. And eventually you can grab the item before you make a sale, and it'll put you into the state of making a sale, and you're more likely to close the individual because you're in the state of selling already. And that's what you're talking about, is being able to
Yeah.
put the jacket on and be in that state
And
immediately
change
without
state.
having to consciously put the pieces together.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
How did you
Absolutely.
formulate that anchor with the jacket?
Well, so first of all, we need just for, I guess, ease, we need, as you say, a totem, which I think is a really good word to use. I think that's a really nice word to use. Um, we need a signal that that isn't going to be too hard to find at the right moment.
You're like, shit, I forgot my phone. Oh no,
Right.
how am I gonna get
I
on
can't
stage?
make it. I can't make. Where's my lucky pen? I'll never make the sale. It's
Yeah,
like,
no kidding.
okay, that's probably not a good totem,
Yeah,
because because it's like you'll lose that lucky. If there's only one of them, you'll lose them. Yeah. So I've got a jacket. Doesn't need to be this
right.
one.
Yeah. Okay. Fair
You
enough.
know, I mean, I've got some specific, you know, I've got a designer that I like more than others. And so, you
Yeah.
know, I've got stacks of them, you know, in the back. Oh, and by the way, you know, these are quite expensive as well. So like this is a sacrifice. Okay. This is
Mm.
a like it cost to wear this. So whenever this goes on, it's like this is just, you know, an etro jacket is not just any ordinary jacket. It's handmade in Italy with beautiful fabric.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, this I always wear one of these again, silk, Italian silk, you know, handmade, made in Italy, beautiful, expensive fabric. I'm not saying, you know, everybody needs expensive, but many totems, as you say, have cost, you know,
Value,
the
tangible
value.
value, so that when you put
Yeah,
them on, you feel
tangible.
the value. And there's something
Right.
with that goes
Feel
that
the value because that part of you is worth it.
right.
You
That's
know?
why I can't have, people do Zoom interviews with like shorts on or pajama bottoms on, but I
No,
can't do it because
no, nor can
it's,
I.
you know what I mean? Exactly. Because
Yeah,
I'm not signaling to my body that I'm serious about this situation. And so there's
right.
a full transformation that has to take place. And what I'm having a hard time with, and this conversation is going to certainly help, is being able to step into it on demand. And when you said something that you could lose, like a pen or shit, I forgot my phone, how am I going to speak? I'm
Right.
thinking about a trigger that you could have that you'll always have on you. Like, for example, Tony Robbins does a certain move before he gets on
Yeah.
stage,
Yeah.
or you can
I mean,
touch.
he has
Right,
those,
exactly.
he has his trampoline thing, which
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
look, one person's totems are not your totems. I watch Tony on the trampoline. I'm going, that's nuts. Like
That's
that's
crazy. That's
like
good.
I would
Yeah.
never do that. I would never do that. But look, he would never wear red socks like you can't see him.
I see him. Yeah, yeah.
He would never wear red socks all the time. And those
Yeah.
are the only socks that I have. You know,
Huh.
so look, here's the thing is that I only have red socks. So there's a part of me, my feet are always ready and dressed to
Mm.
be this version of me. Always my feet, not every other part of me. Sometimes, but if I'm wearing socks, you'll only ever see those type of socks, those red socks. Now, the only time I'm never going to be in those is when I'm not wearing socks. Which,
Which is a different
now
context.
I've
Or on the beach or
set up,
something.
right. So I've set that up. I've set that system up. So I've always got that totem
Yes.
on me.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, again, I'm not saying anybody should do this, but what is it? Tony Robbins jumps up and down on a trampoline, or there may be another one that you were thinking of as well. I cut you off on that, but
He does a spin, I see him,
okay,
before he goes on stage, backstage, he does a spin, pumps his chest and then walks out a different man than when he
interesting,
walked into the arena, or
interesting,
whatever it might be.
interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
long as he's got legs that work,
Yes.
he can always do that ritualistic move.
Yes. Access that
Yeah,
state. Mhm.
access that state. And my guess is if his legs stop working, he can at least sit in a wheelchair and somebody else can spin him around.
Yeah,
You
fair
know,
enough. That's what I
you
thought of with
know,
the fingers. I was like, but shit, what if I lose my fingers one day and then
right, right. Somebody else could do it for you. I mean, there's,
Oh,
you know,
interesting.
could it be transferred? Could the
Hmm.
magic be transferred in some way? But yeah, to your earlier point, I think you need a totem, a signal that you is readily available to you. I think it must have value. It must have cost
Right.
to it in
Mm.
some way. It can't be free. It must have cost and therefore must have value. And by cost, I don't mean, it's got to have cost you dollars. There must be some form of sacrifice to it.
Yeah.
Again, to signal to your mind, this is important. Why? Because you're
Right.
important. Your states of mind are are important.
Mm.
But what it would be to an individual or to you, I don't know. What do you already have that you're already using? Do you think? What's the closest you've
What
got
comes to
so far to
mind?
that?
What comes to mind is something that's free tangibly, but wasn't free as it's coral or it's
Oh,
condensed
nice,
sand over hundreds of years. I found in Cuba, and
nice.
this is something that it took me a long time to find these two rocks on the beach. And so I
Right.
searched for like hours for them, and I finally found them, and they ended up being right next to each other. And so that's a cost, that investment that went into it.
It's
And
birch.
right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be tangible, a monetary investment. It could be a time investment. My
Right.
grandfather, he had a rock that he would carry around in his pocket to fight his anxiety. And so he would rub this rock, and my nana still has it. It's rubbed right down to the core because he
Nice.
would rub it when he. So we have these natural totems that we were able to change states with. And if we do it more intentionally, then we're able to have that control over the situation in
Yeah.
a way that you wouldn't have been able to before.
Yeah, I
Fast.
like what you've done there, and also it's ancestral, isn't it? You're saying, well, my grandfather had one of
Yeah.
these as
Yeah.
well. It's like, okay, like it's a family pattern. There's something very significant about that. So it signifies, not only does it
Right.
signify what it needs to signify for you, but it signifies something, an ancestral line of that.
Yes.
It's like
Right.
I'm not the first. People have, others have come before me, so I'm supported in some way by that, which is a lovely, I would think, a lovely feeling to have.
I agree, man. It's interesting. What we've talked about here is gone to the depths of the psyche and then back up again. So,
Yeah.
I mean, huge props to you for that, man. I got to go and think about my life. When you dive, this is the problem. See, this happens with therapy as well. Is when you dive into the depths of the unconscious, there's a reconstruction that has to take place because pieces can be scattered. And you hear people talk about parts of themselves, like there's a part of me that feels like this is a good idea. And the way I think about that is these are the complexes that are talking. We talk about them as parts of us. And so at the end of these sessions, there's a deconstruction that took place, and we have to take the pieces and put them back together again. And so that's the state that I'm in right now after examining the unconscious. We need to go back and just to stay sane in this world, to be able to put the construction back together and have
Nice.
the unification, that integration. And every time a session like this happens, there's growth that takes place. There's integration into that psyche, that you become a better or more capable individual because you're more aware of the processes that are going on. And it sounds like you've done the exploration. So it's a fascinating conversation, man. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me as part of it. I've enjoyed my time hanging out with you and
Me too.
and your viewers and your listeners.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Absolutely. So, dude, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add before we kick this off here?
No, been great. Been great chatting with you. If you want to hear more from me, anybody out there, Mark Bowden, and you'll find me all over the internet. So just search me out. You'll find me.
Love it. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
Cheers, Carl. I'll catch you around, man. Bye now.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that podcast episode. And if you want to get a free copy of my book, go to kylesbook.com and you can get a copy there. I'll talk with you soon.